Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People Story. What would you do if your HOA literally tried to steal 10 feet of your property while you were at work? I'm talking about a full-scale community initiative built right on top of my private garden. They sent the certified letters and the heavy threats, but they made one massive mistake. They assumed I hadn't read my deed. I need to get this off my chest because what happened over the past few months has been absolutely insane. 5 years ago, I bought my house in a pretty standard suburban neighborhood. Nothing fancy, just a regular community with an HOA that mostly dealt with road maintenance and making sure nobody painted their house neon green. The place was fine, quiet, normal. But here's the thing about my property that made it special. I have a corner lot, which means my house sits at the intersection of two streets. That gave me something most of my neighbors didn't have, which was this long strip of land running down the entire side of my house next to the secondary street. We're talking about a piece of land that's roughly 10 feet wide and runs the full length of my property, maybe 80 feet or so. When I was buying the place, my realtor and I went over everything with a fine-tooth comb. I'm not someone who just signs papers without reading them. We pulled up the official county plat maps at the title company, and I made absolutely sure this side yard was part of my property, not a public easement, not some weird shared space, mine. The deed said so. The plat map said so. Everything was crystal clear. I'm really into gardening. It's not just a hobby for me. It's what I do to relax, to clear my head after work, to feel like I'm creating something beautiful. So naturally, when I moved in, I looked at this blank strip of grass next to my house and saw potential. Over the next 5 years, I poured my heart into that space. I built a stone pathway that winds through the whole length of it. Each stone was placed by hand, set into sand and gravel, fitted together like a puzzle. It took me 3 weekends just to get the base level right. Then I put in raised garden beds, 4 of them, where I grow vegetables and herbs, tomatoes, peppers, basil, rosemary, all kinds of stuff. I planted a Japanese maple tree about 3 years ago, and it's finally starting to get that beautiful mature look with the red leaves. There's also a weeping cherry tree at the far end that blooms every spring like something out of a painting. Along the pathway, I put in perennial flower beds. Black-eyed Susans, coneflowers, lavender, daylilies. Things that come back year after year and bloom at different times, so there's always color. At the very end of the pathway, under the weeping cherry, I had plans to put a wooden bench. Just a simple spot to sit and enjoy the work I'd done. This wasn't just a yard to me, it was my project, my sanctuary. When I had a rough day at work, I'd come home and spend an hour out there pulling weeds or watering or just walking the path. Neighbors would stop sometimes and compliment it. Old couples would walk by and tell me how nice it looked. It made me proud. For the first few years, the HOA was completely hands-off about it. They'd send out their monthly emails about upcoming road work or reminding people to bring in their trash cans on time, but that was it. The board was run by some older folks who'd lived in the neighborhood for decades, and they seemed to understand that as long as you weren't causing problems, they'd leave you alone. Then, about 6 months ago, things changed. We had an election for the HOA board, and a whole new group got voted in. The new president was this woman, maybe in her 50s, who I'd seen around the neighborhood before but never really talked to. Within a month of taking over, it became obvious she had very different ideas about how the HOA should operate. She started walking around the neighborhood with a clipboard, literally inspecting people's yards. She'd stand on the sidewalk and take notes. She sent out emails about community beautification standards and enhancing property values through uniform appearance. The tone was different, more aggressive, more controlling. I first realized something was wrong on a Saturday morning in early spring. I was out in the side yard checking on the herbs in one of the raised beds when I noticed 2 guys standing about halfway down my property. They weren't from the neighborhood. They had on work clothes, and one of them was rolling a measuring wheel along the ground while the other one took notes. I walked over and asked if I could help them with something. They seemed a little startled, like they didn't expect anyone to come talk to them. One of them said they were from the landscaping company the HOA uses and that the new board president had sent them to survey the common areas for some kind of new project. I told them, as politely as I could, that they were standing on my private property, not a common area. They looked at each other and one of them shrugged and said they were just following the work order they'd been given. I didn't want to make a scene with guys who were just doing their jobs, so I let it go and assumed someone at the HOA had made a simple mistake about where the property lines were. A week later, I was getting ready for work when I glanced out the kitchen window and saw something that made my stomach drop. Someone had hammered a wooden stake into the ground in my side yard. It had a bright orange ribbon tied to it, fluttering in the breeze. But here's the thing that really got me. It wasn't at the edge of my property where you might expect a survey marker to be. It was about 10 feet in, right next to my Japanese maple tree. I went outside to look at it, and the more I stared at that stake, the angrier I got. This was my land, my tree, my garden, and someone had just waltzed onto my property and driven a stake into the ground without asking, without explaining, without anything. It felt invasive, disrespectful, wrong. I took out my phone and snapped a few photos, making sure to get the stake, the tree, the raised beds, and my house in the background so there was clear context showing exactly where this thing was. Then I went to work, but I couldn't focus all day. That orange ribbon kept flashing in my mind. That evening, I sat down and wrote an email to the HOA board. I kept it calm and professional. I explained that I'd found a survey stake placed in my side yard, attached the photo, and asked if they could clarify its purpose and arrange to have it removed. I signed it, sent it off, and figured I'd get a quick apology, and that would be the end of it. The response I got 2 days later was not what I expected. It came from the board president herself. The email was long and full of corporate speak about an exciting new community green space initiative designed to enhance neighborhood synergy and create gathering spaces for residents to enjoy nature together. She didn't acknowledge that the stake was on my property. She didn't apologize. Instead, she wrote like I should be grateful for this amazing project she was planning. At the bottom of the email, she'd attached what she called a preliminary site map. When I opened it, I actually laughed out loud, but not in a good way. It was a screenshot from Google Maps with a red box drawn over it in what looked like Microsoft Paint. The box clearly included a 10-foot strip of my side yard labeled Future Common Area. My garden beds, my pathway, my trees, all of it was inside that red box. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't confusion about property lines. Someone had looked at my side yard, decided they wanted it for the HOA, and was now trying to just take it by creating fake maps and acting like they were official. I read the email 3 more times, each time getting more furious. But I didn't respond right away. I wanted to think about this carefully. If someone was trying to steal part of my property, I needed to be smart about how I handled it. A few days later, the monthly HOA newsletter got emailed out to everyone in the neighborhood. I opened it up, and right there at the top was a big feature story about the Community Green Space Initiative. It had that same terrible paint-drawn map, but now it was being presented like it was already approved and official. The newsletter explained that the HOA would soon begin work to clear and prepare the designated common area, and asked residents to please remove any personal items from this community space to facilitate the project. They were putting this in front of the entire neighborhood, making it public, trying to create social pressure to force me to give up without a fight. Like if enough people saw it in the newsletter, it would somehow become real. I sat at my kitchen table and just stared at my computer screen. Part of me wanted to fire off an angry email pointing out all the ways they were wrong. But another part of me, the calmer part, told me to wait, let them commit, let them keep digging. The real escalation came about a week after the newsletter. I got a notification that I had certified mail waiting at the post office. I drove over on my lunch break, signed for it, and opened it in the parking lot. It was from the HOA, and it was titled, Notice to Cure or Quit. The letter stated that I was in violation of HOA rules by storing personal property including but not limited to garden beds, stone pathways, ornamental trees, and seating on a designated common area. It gave me 30 days to remove everything from what they called the disputed strip. If I didn't comply, the letter said the HOA would hire a contractor to clear the land and bill the cost directly to me, plus daily fines starting at $100 per day. I sat in my car reading this legal threat about my own property, my own garden that I'd spent 5 years building, and something inside me just clicked. They wanted to play games with official documents and legal threats? Fine, I could do that too. But I was going to do it right. I didn't reply to the letter. I didn't call the board president. I didn't send an angry email. Instead, I smiled, put the letter carefully back in its envelope, and drove to the county records office. The clerk at the records office was helpful. I explained what I needed, which was a certified copy of the official plat map for my entire subdivision from when it was first developed, plus a certified copy of my property deed. She printed everything out, stamped each page with the official county seal, and charged me $50. $50 for the ammunition I needed to end this whole thing. When I got home, I spread the documents out on my dining room table. The official plat map showed every lot in the subdivision with precise measurements. My property was clearly marked. The boundaries were exact. That 10-foot strip they wanted, it was inside my property lines by a good margin, not even close to being a common area. My deed backed it up completely. The legal description of my property, written in that dense language deeds use, described the exact dimensions and boundaries. Everything matched the plat map perfectly. I owned that land. There was no ambiguity, no gray area, no room for interpretation. I spent the next evening putting together a folder. I made copies of everything. The HOA's threatening letter, a printout of that ridiculous newsletter with the paint map, a high-quality print of the official county plat map with my property lines highlighted in bright yellow. My certified deed. I organized it all carefully, each document in order, building my case like a lawyer preparing for trial. Then I wrote a letter. Not an angry rant, not an emotional plea. A cold, professional, devastatingly polite letter addressed to the entire HOA board. I wrote it like I was genuinely confused and just wanted clarification. I started by acknowledging receipt of their notice and expressing my desire to comply with all community rules. Then I pointed out that I'd noticed a significant discrepancy between the map they'd been circulating and the legally binding documents for our community. I referenced the exhibits I was attaching, which were their newsletter map, the certified county plat map, and my certified deed. The key part was the question I asked. I wrote that to clear up any confusion, could they please provide me with a copy of the legally filed and recorded deed transfer or revised plat map that redesignated this portion of my private property as a common area. I needed to see the legal basis for their claim. I ended by saying I would wait for their documentation before taking any action, thank them for their time, and sign my name. It was perfect. I wasn't threatening them, I wasn't arguing. I was just asking a simple question that they couldn't answer because the documentation they needed didn't exist. My property had never been transferred to the HOA. No plat map had ever been revised. They had nothing. I printed the letter on good paper, assembled all the exhibits behind it, put everything in a large envelope, and took it to the post office. I sent it certified mail with return receipt requested to the HOA's official address. Now there would be proof that they received it, proof of exactly what I'd sent them, and proof of when. Then I went home and waited. For over a week, there was complete silence. No emails, no calls, no response at all. The 30-day deadline they'd given me in their threatening letter was getting closer every day, but I wasn't worried. I knew what I had. One morning, I was getting ready for work when I glanced out the kitchen window. The orange ribbon steak was gone, just vanished overnight. Nobody mentioned it. Nobody explained. It was just removed quietly like it had never been there at all. A few days later, I got an email. Not from the board president, but from the treasurer. The email was short and obviously written in a panic. It apologized for what it called a clerical error and miscommunication. It said the Green Space Initiative was on hold pending a boundary review and that I should disregard the previous notice. That was it. No admission of what they'd tried to do, no real apology, just corporate language trying to make it sound like an innocent mistake instead of an attempted land grab. I didn't respond, I just saved the email and added it to my folder. The next monthly HOA meeting was scheduled for the following week. I normally never attended these things. They were boring and usually just old business about road maintenance or budget reports. But this time, I cleared my schedule and made sure I'd be there. I showed up 15 minutes early and took a seat in the front row. I had my folder with me, all the documents inside, sitting visibly on my lap. Other residents trickled in. Some of them I recognized from the neighborhood. Most of them had probably seen the newsletter about the Green Space Initiative and were curious about it. The board sat at a table at the front of the room. The president looked uncomfortable the moment she saw me sitting there with my folder. She kept glancing at me while they went through the opening announcements and approval of last month's minutes. When they got to new business, someone from the back of the room raised their hand and asked about the Green Space Initiative. They wanted to know when work was going to start because they thought it sounded like a nice addition to the neighborhood. The president's face went red. She cleared her throat and said the project had been indefinitely postponed due to unforeseen surveying complications. Her voice was shaky. Another neighbor spoke up and asked what kind of complications. The newsletter had made it sound like everything was ready to go. Why the sudden change? The president stammered something about needing to verify boundaries and make sure everything was properly documented before proceeding. She wouldn't make eye contact with anyone. The whole room could feel that something was off, that she was hiding something. I didn't say a word. I just sat there with my folder, watching her squirm. It was enough. The meeting moved on to other topics, but the damage was done. People were whispering to each other. They knew something had gone wrong with the president's big project. Her credibility was shot. A week later, I got one more piece of mail. This time it was from a law firm, the HOA's attorney. The letter was brief and formal. It stated that the HOA acknowledged the property boundaries as defined by the county records and formally retracted its previous notice to me. It apologized for the administrative error. I read that letter 3 times, savoring every word. This was it. My proof that I'd won. They'd backed down completely, and they'd put it in writing through their lawyer. I filed it in my folder with everything else. The fallout in the neighborhood was slow but steady. Word got around about what had happened. Not because I was talking about it, but because people talk. The HOA president's authority was gone. Nobody trusted her judgment anymore. She'd tried to grab someone's private property and failed spectacularly. When the next board election came around 6 months later, she didn't even run. Just quietly stepped down. The new board that got elected was much more careful about respecting property rights and not overstepping their authority. For me, things went back to normal. Better than normal, actually. I went ahead and bought that wooden bench I'd been planning. It's solid cedar with a nice finish that'll hold up to the weather. I placed it at the end of my stone pathway right under the weeping cherry tree. Last weekend I spent Saturday morning in the garden. The tomatoes are coming in heavy this year and the herbs are thriving. The Japanese maple has grown another foot and the leaves are that deep red color that makes the whole yard look amazing. I finished up my work, grabbed a cold drink from the house, and sat down on my bench. From that spot I can see the entire length of my side yard. The pathway I built by hand, the raised beds I constructed, the trees I planted and nurtured, every single bit of it on my property, my land, protected by deeds and plat maps and the law. The HOA had wanted to turn my garden into their common ground, to erase 5 years of my work like it meant nothing. They thought they could bully me into giving up what was mine through fake maps and threatening letters. In the end, all they managed to do was humiliate themselves and prove that you can't just take something because you want it. You need actual legal grounds, actual documentation, actual rights, and they had none of those things. I sat on that bench, sipping my drink in the shade of my weeping cherry tree, and I have to say the garden had never looked more beautiful. Worth every bit of effort I put into it, worth fighting for, and completely, legally, undeniably mine. The next one is a malicious compliance story. A few months ago, a new business investor at work came on board as a manager, and he has been an absolute hard-ass. He is cracking down on anything he considers to be a waste of time, and he is unforgiving. After a week of watching us work, he and the other managers held a company-wide meeting to iron out some wrinkles in the company that he observed since he started. It wasn't an open dialogue, though. In fact, that's one of the things he wanted to wrinkle out. It was essentially just 20 minutes of, "It's our way or the highway, deal with it." The line, "If we want your input, we will ask for it, period," really stuck with me, though, and it was made abundantly clear afterwards that it was directed at me. The company has had a big problem recently with employee turnover, and I was in the position to know why, since I interact with everyone through my role. Essentially, people are quitting because the work they were doing wasn't what they signed up to do. The phrase, "If I knew this is what I would be doing, I wouldn't have accepted the job," was a common sentiment. They accepted the job under the impression that they would be serving customers, answering emails and phone calls, general customer service stuff, but instead they spend about 90% of their time in a hot warehouse packing online orders over and over again. I shared that with management. I let them know what the people leaving were saying in case they wanted to take that into account moving forward. They just thanked me and I left, but the new manager hated that so much that he decided to make a meeting about giving them unsolicited advice. They spoke with me privately afterwards and referred back to when I told them about what the quitting employees said, and they told me that the way they interpreted that was that I was implying that they were being deceitful when hiring people. I told them, no, I don't think that at all. I was just relaying what those people were saying about how they felt. They didn't care. They doubled down and said again, "If we want your input, we will ask for it, period." That's how I knew it was directed at me. I asked them for clarification, like what constitutes advice or input, and the new boss said, Unless you are asking us a question about the work you're supposed to be doing, we don't want to hear it. We don't want your opinion on how you think we should handle situations. We don't want your ideas on how you think the business can be better run. And we don't want gossip about what other people are saying about us. Just focus on your job. Fine then, I'll roll with that. No problem. I've worked for them for years, and they always appreciated my ideas, opinions, and input until that point. But hey, if they don't want my input anymore, that's their choice, and I'll respect that. I knew it was just the new boss saying that stuff, since this sort of attitude with them only started when he did, but the others either agreed with him or were too intimidated to disagree. Either way, whatever, I'll comply with their request. Since then, the problem hasn't been fixed. We've had 2 more people come and go, both of them because they didn't sign up for this. Shocker. A third one started about 5 weeks ago, and he has taken his frustration in a different direction. I've overheard him complaining over and over again to other people about how he didn't sign on to stand around in a hot warehouse for hours packing online orders, but instead of quitting like everyone else, he just got angrier and angrier, and then he hulked out. I was upstairs at my desk when I started to hear smashing. I went down to the warehouse to see what was going on, and this guy was taking customers' packages and smashing them out of frustration. A few others in the warehouse gathered and just watched in amusement. It was like something out of a cartoon. The new boss heard the commotion and came down. Long story short, the guy was fired, and I was asked if I knew why he flipped out. I said, I don't know what happened exactly to cause him to flip out, but I know that for weeks he's been complaining about not signing up to work in a hot warehouse for hours. Maybe he just reached a tipping point about it, not sure. And he said, well, why didn't you tell us? So of course I said, because last time I told you that employees were complaining about that, you accused me of implying that you were being deceitful when hiring them. Then you told me to stop gossiping. He had to eat crow a bit on that, which was just so ducking delicious to witness, but I was also reprimanded for taking the request too literally, and he accused me of being petty. Whatever though, I don't care, because I had to adjust the stock levels for the goods that had to be replaced, and they lost about $10,000 in the rampage. Some of the items that were smashed worth $2,000 each. Learning that made the whole thing worthwhile. The next one is an entitled people story. I just read a post here, and it really reminded me of an accident I had just over a year ago, but until reading the recent story, it never dawned on me how entitled the other party was, or to post it. Anyway, I reflected on it for some time to give extra detail for, hopefully, a fun read. It had recently snowed, but this particular morning the roads were clear and we had a sprinkle that was melting on contact. Beyond cold outside, like negative. I was somewhat on autopilot, headed to drop my kid off at daycare and go to work. While stopped, I hear a bang and a car slams into the back of me. So hard it totaled my full-size truck, but I wouldn't find that out for weeks later. My initial reaction is your typical WTF, but my son thinks it was awesome and is laughing hysterically, so I can't help to kinda soften up. It's super cold, so for 2 to 3 minutes no one does anything. Then I get out and the driver behind me is not saying much, has an attitude. Again, my kids are in the care, so I'm cautious and not a small dude, but says license and insurance like a cop, which I gladly hand over and hold my hand out. He hands me his, we take pics, and he says I guess we'll wait for the police, then heads behind his car. This is when I realize there is a car behind him that's absolutely demolished, and his car was actually sandwiched. My truck looks like it barely took a hit, only the rear bumper, which may explain some of his attitude in hindsight. I hear him go back there, again freezing and kids, so I go back in the truck, and I hear yelling. The lady is going off and he is nodding and pointing at me. The cop arrives and starts taking my info while these two are full on Sherlock Holmes mode, taking pics of the intersection and their cars and my truck, etc., etc. I can see them in my mirror. As this is happening, I think nothing of it, because here in the US, in 99% of cases, the person who rear-ended the other is at fault, and in 100% of cases, if you hit a stopped vehicle, you are at fault, so I'm chilling. The cop is cool, seems cut and dry, then tells me to come with him. He looks at my kids and says, actually, wait here. Somewhat noteworthy, my kids are mixed, and I am from another country originally, while everyone else involved is as white as unseasoned chicken. About 10 minutes go by, the cop comes back, and at this point, the tone is completely different, very confrontational, and I don't get it. Then I finally put it together when he says, "Why did you slam on your brakes?" I start saying I didn't. I was stopped, and he's somewhat level but rude, saying the intersection is 20 yards back, at least 4 car lengths. Was I about to turn or what? I'm kind of panicking now because how do you prove you were stopped if 2 people are allied lying? Who remembers exactly why they slowed down or stopped as they were on their regular commute? It's also like 7:30 a.m. and freezing cold. After stuttering through saying I was stopped, man, and trying to say my kid's daycare is 2 more turns away, I didn't stop for nothing. The cop walks away shaking his head, says to hold tight. At this point, my kids aren't laughing. The energy has changed completely and I'm quiet/enraged. Romeo, guy who hit me, walks back towards my truck kinda half smirking while his new beloved is just standing next to her mess of a car, arms folded, full Karen mode. As he approaches, he's shaking his head saying something like, "What on earth?" And I roll my window down and interrupt to say, "You know I was stopped." He chuckles and says, "Bud, it's barely snowing. I saw no brake lights and you absolutely totaled her car. I am not a morning person." I say, "Walk away," very firmly, and as he starts to speak, the cop comes up behind him, says, "I got this, Romeo." But he actually knew the twat's name like they had somehow bonded that quickly. He has a stack of papers and is obviously ready to cite me to death. Cue up universe. A Christmas song comes on my Spotify and my kids love. I start talking about their various Xmas toys. I think it just barely took my mind there and I suddenly remember like an idiot. I just got a dash cam a couple months ago for Christmas. In my defense, it's very small and connects to your phone when you want to view video, otherwise just sits in the car plugged in, and I literally set it up Christmas night and forgot it completely. The cop asks to see my insurance and I hand it to him while basically scrambling on my phone to find what app it was. As he's talking, I see a still on the app of this exact same spot, and it has the current time. I click it and say, "I think my dash cam has this." The cop steps back, and I see his whole face shift. He realizes maybe I'm not a liar and says, "I don't see the red Explorer there." I say, "No, it's a cheap cam, only has the front." He says, "Does it show why you stopped?" I apologize because the app is not loading the damn video. Cop goes back to being the cool guy I first interacted with, waves at my kids and stuff while I look. Like 5 minutes go by and this poor dude has had enough, hands me his card with his cell phone number and says to send it to him. Long story short, the video was like my entire commute 30 minutes, so when it finally loaded it actually downloaded, but I didn't have any way to send such a long video. I get out to flag him down and I see the lady is standing at his cruiser going off and her new boy toy is right there with her too. Cue up, sweet vindication. They all start heading towards me. I think the cop remembers last second I have kids and says back in your vehicles to them. She almost screams at him, "I'll be right here." But Romeo goes back. While she's standing at my taillight essentially, I start explaining I can't send you the video. I hear her mocking, "Oh, somehow my phone can't send this video proof," and just hand him my phone. My boy is like a PRO with videos. Honestly, I hadn't even found the moment of impact after trying for a while. I just knew the full time frame was in this video, but it's a cheap front-facing cam only. In what felt like maybe 30 seconds, he says, "Here it is," and asks me to cut the music. Yes, my dumbass hadn't even pieced together that the dash cam has audio BC. All I was hearing was the Xmas songs. I see the video, it's me stopped, and you hear a bang and the camera just barely shakes. He does a few more things with the phone and hands it back to me. He's now chatting about random crap like how brutal the NFL game yesterday was and whatnot. It's honestly fine because I was stressed TF out 5 minutes ago. He says, "Did it send?" I realize he sent himself a video from my phone and the check is there, so I say yes, and I'm sorry, man. I don't know why exactly I slowed down. I really think I stopped. He looks at me now, deathly serious, face bright red. I hadn't even realized he was talking to keep from raging, and says, "Because of the bus." Juliet almost stumbles back and kind of jogs toward her car. He hands me a paper with all the other drivers' info, both of them, and says he might call later to email the report if I need it, but turns to kids, "Have a good day, guys." Before I pull off, I realize he's almost stomping towards them. Later that day, I watched the video he sent himself, and sure enough, a bus stopped to pick up people and stopped randomly again, but we were already going so slow I hadn't even thought twice about it, and when the bus took off, I simply didn't go full Usain Bolt about following. Before I could let off the brake, you see the shake and hear the crash. Insurance later told me that for how hard she hit the other guy, and for him to hit me that hard, it means she was going 55 plus in a 25. About 6 months after it all, insurance asked me for all these extra details and reimbursed car seats and stuff I hadn't even worried about because it wasn't really damaged. But then I eventually got a letter from the lady's lawyer basically outlining how much she was dealing with in damages and pleading with us to settle rather than sue her personally. I never replied and never bothered with it, but I got a letter asking if I would be a supporting witness just a couple weeks back and realized it was Romeo. My guess is he wasn't stopped or didn't stop far enough away and insurance wouldn't help him unless he sued her. Naturally, I threw the letter away so the lovebirds can deal with each other. The next one is an entitled Parents Story. This happened a few months back. At the time I was working at the mall, my company had opened up this new exhibit that was this sort of interactive art experience. One of the rooms is essentially a giant artsy ball pit. Because this was a mall, and only so many renovations can be made on what's supposed to be a temporary place. This 4 feet deep ball pit was essentially a big safety hazard. The bottom of it was just concrete covered by a thin layer of carpet, so there was absolutely no jumping into the pit for safety. One day when I was on lot duty, there was this family with a few kids, including a younger son. Before anyone enters the area, I'm supposed to explain all the rules to them, including the no jumping rule. But this kid just runs past me and straight to the ball boy. The mom is decent at this point and have him come back, and I explain the rules to them. They go in, I watch, and already this kid is being a problem. The jumping is only one of the things the family was blatantly ignoring. I had explained to them that they should be putting any personal belongings in the cupboards we have, and the mom just let this kid bring his iPad into the ball pit with him. This technically isn't against the rules, but it's not a smart idea to bring an iPad into a ball pit where it can easily get lost, but whatever. The problem started when this kid starts getting out of the pit and jumping back in. I see him doing this and tell the mom, again, that he can't be jumping into the pit. She says okay and tells the son he can't be doing that, but she doesn't actually do anything to stop him. He does it repeatedly, and her several times that there's no jumping allowed, and the same thing happens. She tells him to stop, and then does nothing else as he continues to get out and jump back in. Eventually, I'm fed up, and I say directly to the kid, "You can't be jumping into the ball pit. If you keep doing it, you will have to leave." After this, the mom finally takes her kids out and they leave. I find out later that this entitled mom complained to my manager that she didn't like how I spoke to her son, and I threatened that I would kick them out. I'm so ducking tired of these dumbass parents not showing their kids that their actions have consequences and that breaking the rules means that they lose privileges. You can't just tell your kid no and expect that to be the end when they keep doing the ducking thing they aren't supposed to do. SMH, anyway, thank you for watching.